In the past 20 years, the English Premier League has been home to some of the biggest stars in world football. And many of those stars happen to play in the center of midfield. So whether they're a box-to-box number 8, a holding midfielder who just loves putting in crunching tackles, or if they're a goal-scoring number 10. In this video, we're going to be breaking down the top 10 center midfielders in Premier League history. Slight disclaimer, saying in history is probably a little unfair, because to be perfectly honest with you, I was not alive in 1985 and I don't know who's playing in the center of the park back then. So for the purposes of my age range, we're going to be primarily focusing on players that played center midfield from the late 90s, early 2000s up until present. Now, back to the list. Number 10, Angolo Kante. When talking about Angolo Kante, it is virtually impossible to ever say anything negative about this guy. Kante is someone who I desperately hope that they make a movie about one day, because his story and career is absolutely incredible. Being someone who was signed by Leicester City and a major part of that team that won the historic 2015-2016 title, he then went on to join Chelsea, where he won another Premier League as well as even a Champions League. And let's not forget the fact that this guy also won the 2018 World Cup. Now, while Kante was an unbelievable footballer in his own right, he is probably lower on this list strictly just due to the fact that he's 32 years old now. Obviously, he has since gone and joined Al Ittihad in the Saudi Arabian Football League. I definitely would have liked to have seen him in the Prem still. I still think he had more to offer, and I think his career was maybe cut short just a little bit. Number 9, Cesc Fabregas. If there's one word that comes to mind when I think of Cesc Fabregas, it's creativity. Whether it was his younger years at Arsenal or his later years when he returned to the Premier League with Chelsea, whenever this guy was on the pitch, it always felt like he was going to create a goal. This dude was a threat all the time in the Premier League. And honestly, the only real debate when it comes to Fabregas is whether he's a bigger Arsenal legend or a bigger Chelsea legend. And honestly, the only reason he's this low on my list is because, he just went and joined the greatest club team that's ever played during the peak of his career, which can't really blame the guy. Number 8, Yaya Toure. Now, if you were to base this list off of just taking these players like individual seasons, Yaya Toure in 2013 might be top of this list. It's honestly impressive how a man who looked absolutely winded every point of the game that you watched him was just so unique, so creative, and just always had an impact on the game. He was kind of the type of player that when watching him play, I almost felt as though he could play anywhere on the pitch and have some level of success. He was that good. Probably a little low on this list, maybe a little lower than some people would have him, mainly just on the basis of, while he was at Manchester City for 8 years, I feel like really his impact was more for like 5 years. There were a few years that I felt like Yaya was just kind of lingering around at Manchester City. I know the relationship between the club and the player kind of deteriorated a little bit. But like I said earlier, if you're going to take just one season, Yaya Toure, 2013, that dude was unreal. Number 7, David Silva. Since we're on the topic of outrageously talented Manchester City center midfielders, at number 7 we have David Silva. Arguably, in my opinion, when you look at all of the 10 center midfielders that are on this list, in my personal opinion, David Silva has some of the best technical ability out of the lot. Obviously, David Silva is known a lot for his creativity on the ball. However, an underrated aspect of his game, to me, was his ability to distribute the ball and maintain possession for City. And looking at this list, it's very, very interesting because a lot of the players have just a lot of God-given ability, whether it be their pace, their size, whatever it is. A lot of these attributes that they had physically, David Silva didn't, and he had to make up with his technical ability. As an impartial fan, David Silva was always so much fun to watch every single weekend, and whenever he was playing your team, you were unbelievably upset whenever he was in the starting lineup. An unbelievable talent who, in my opinion, is completely underrated in world football. I have David Silva at number 7. Number 6, Roy Keane. Now, a lot of Manchester United fans are probably going to be very, very upset that Roy Keane is this low, and to a certain extent, I definitely understand why they would be. I think oftentimes too many people criticize how rough Roy Keane played, how many red cards he got, and they really don't understand that he was kind of a player of his time, and that was a lot more commonplace than it is now in the game. And given Roy Keane's toughness, I think a lot of times people overlook the aspects of his game that were also unbelievable. A great passer of the ball will get an odd goal, and he'll obviously put in a tough challenge. Oftentimes, obviously, in the sport, the physical aspect of the game is really, really important, the technical aspect, but it's also a mental and a leadership quality that these players would have that would be really, really important, and I think Roy Keane definitely had that. When you look at a lot of the success Manchester United had in the late 90s, early 2000s, and when you listen to his former teammates speak about him, you really, really begin to understand how important of a guy he was in the locker room. And also, you really begin to understand how important of a guy he was on the pitch. Some of the guys I have higher on this list, to be perfectly honest with you, that's just strictly down to the fact that I think that they were technically better. But no disrespect to Roy Keane, I think the guy was an absolute legend. Number 5, Patrick Vieira. Now this is where the Manchester United and Arsenal fans are really going to clash. And to be honest, I don't really blame them. I could totally understand if someone put Roy Keane over Patrick Vieira. To me, I just think that Patrick Vieira was a much, much better, well-rounded center midfielder than Roy Keane was. Big, good passer of the ball, will get a goal, will get an assist. I think he was just unbelievable for that Arsenal team. I do think that potentially Roy Keane might have been a better leader than Patrick Vieira, no disrespect to Vieira, and maybe he kind of has more of a legendary status when we think about those late 90s, early 2000s. But when we're going strictly on their role as a center midfielder, to me, I think Patrick Vieira just edges it in terms of playing ability, and that's why I have him at number 5. Number 4, Paul Scholes. Not much negative to say about this guy. I mean, an absolute legend in his own right. When I think of passing the ball in the English Premier League, I just think of Paul Scholes. This guy's distribution and his technical ability, he really, really controlled the center midfield of Manchester United post Roy Keane. When they really, granted the treble, I know there was a lot of success in the late 90s, early 2000s, but to me, when I was growing up, Paul Scholes ran the midfields for Manchester United. An unbelievable player. He will get a goal for you, put in a crunching tackle. Really, he just seemed like the heartbeat of Manchester United for me in those early to late 2000s, even into the 2010s, alongside Giggsy and the likes. He was just an unbelievable player. I don't have him top 3 because I think the other players were just significantly more well-rounded. But I can't even think of anything negative to say about this guy's game. Absolute legend. Number 3, Frank Lampard. I mean, what else is there to say about a guy who, for one of the most reputable English clubs of all time, as a center midfielder, holds the goal-scoring record? I think, to be honest with you, over time, people have tried to portray Frank as though he was a number 10. In my opinion, he really wasn't. He was just a number 8 that could play the role of a number 10 and play the role of a number 6. He was great defensively, great passer of the ball. When you think of a fully rounded center midfielder, Frank Lampard is one of the guys you think about. Unbelievable for Chelsea, just an absolute legend. Similar to the Roy Keane, Patrick Vieira debate, I could understand if people have him one step higher, but to be perfectly honest with you, I think the next guy is just a bit better than him. Number 2, Steven Gerrard. Now, admittedly, as a Liverpool supporter, I really wanted to put Steven Gerrard as number 1, and I think a lot of people would put him as number 1. Like Lampard, I do consider Gerrard just an out-and-out right, well-rounded number 8. I think he could have played as a number 10 and did. I think he could have played deeper as a number 6. He did that later in his career. Get goals, distribute, get assists, put tackles in. In my opinion, Steven Gerrard had it all. I know a lot of people put Frank Lampard above Gerrard just because of the goals, but I think that, obviously Gerrard played with the likes of Xavi Alonso, Javier Mascherano, but a lot of people forget that he also played with Joe Allen and Charlie Adam. And I think a lot of people overlook the years when Liverpool did not have a great supporting cast around Gerrard. Now, while that's the case, it can't be overlooked that Gerrard did not win the big ticket, unfortunately. He never won the Premier League. And it's really unfortunate. I really would have loved to have seen him win the Prem. An unbelievable player, to be perfectly honest with you. But he doesn't come at number 1, and that's because at number 1 I got Kevin De Bruyne. And no, I don't think it's too early to say that this guy is the greatest center midfielder that the Prem has ever seen. I think if he retired tomorrow, I think everyone would say that. Maybe not unanimously. I think there are probably a lot of nostalgia merchants out there. But when you really break down the full roles of a center midfielder, I think Kevin De Bruyne is just so complete, gets the job done, and I think he's going to go down as one of the Premier League all-time greats. And in my opinion, he's the greatest center midfielder the Prem has ever seen. Now, do me a favor, if you guys like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to follow me on TikTok. And I will see you guys with a new video next week. Peace.